When we think about back pain, we often think about lifting heavy objects or lifting in awkward positions. Certainly these activities can lead to back pain, however, back pain can develop without lifting in these more difficult circumstances. To understand this, let's consider the biomechanics of the back. Think about your back like a teeter-totter or a seesaw. If the fulcrum or pivot point is located at just the right position, a very small person could easily lift a very heavy person. Conversely, if the fulcrum is moved to a different point, closer to the person lifting, it could be very difficult for a much heavier person to lift a much lighter person. This is a side view of our spine. And if we think about the back like a teeter-totter or seesaw, it's important to first identify where the pivot point or the fulcrum of the teeter-totter is. If we look here at the spine, that pivot point would be along these bones right here. We call these the vertebral bodies. You can see that that is where the spine bends. That's the pivot point, and the muscles that are doing this work are attached to this back side of our back. And these muscles would run up and down in this region. And you can see the distance from the pivot point to where the muscles do their work is a very small distance. You can imagine that if this were a teeter-totter, that would be as if the pivot point or the fulcrum were very near one end of the seesaw. This would make it very difficult for even a heavy person to lift a baby on the other end. When we lift things with our back and we lift very far in front of us, that puts our back at even a greater biomechanical disadvantage. To help demonstrate this, we have a volunteer, Devin, and we have a machine which will help us to hear how much work our back is doing as we assume different postures and do different activities. So we have our volunteer hooked up to our EMG beeping machine. This machine will produce a sound, a beeping sound, when his back muscles have to fire. The more muscles that are recruited and the more work they are doing, the more frequent those beeping sounds will become. Let's have him bend forward without anything in his hands. You can hear that his back is doing work even though he's not carrying anything of significant weight. This is because his back is supporting his upper body weight. Now we are going to add a 30-pound weight, but we're going to have him hold it in an ideal position as close to his body as possible. By holding the weight close to his body, he's decreasing the biomechanical disadvantage of his back. Let's see what happens when he extends his arms forward. His back is working much harder in this position. Let's have him bend forward again without anything in his hand. This is a posture that is often required to do specific job tasks and duties at various employers. And you can note that even without any weight in his hand, his back is having to do some work. Over the course of a day, if this posture is maintained, certainly that amount of work can cause some back fatigue or soreness. So what can be done? Medical guidelines review a lot of different research articles on various topics, including back pain, in an effort to provide recommendations that are most strongly supported by science. Here are some of the more effective recommendations for preventing back pain. For jobs that require prolonged sitting and standing, back pain can be decreased by providing rest and exercise breaks, as well as task rotation or variation. Many safety-conscious companies provide these breaks, as well as structured task rotation into the day. One of the more effective activities you can do during your breaks would be brisk walking or other mild aerobic exercise. Physical exercise is not only effective when performed during breaks during the workday, but the evidence suggests that exercise outside of work is one of the most effective ways to prevent the development of low back pain. While no specific type or intensity of exercise is recommended, multiple studies have found that exercise is the most consistent method of preventing nonspecific low back pain. More frequent exercise is typically preferable to increasing the intensity of the exercise regimen. For those who do develop mild low back pain, walking has been shown to help decrease the duration of any back pain episode. Additionally, stretching can be beneficial. We have our volunteer here again to demonstrate the type of stretching that the evidence supports the most, and that's called directional stretching. As our volunteer can demonstrate, our back can bend in multiple different directions: forward, backwards, to both sides, as well as rotating. Directional stretching states that we ought to stretch in the direction that alleviates or helps our pain to decrease. So if our volunteer has back pain, but that pain decreases when he leans backwards, then he ought to lean backward and hold that position and do that multiple times throughout the day. In other words, find the position that feels the best and stretch that direction throughout the day. If you find that you do not have a direction that feels good, you can do something called slump stretching. You can sit in a chair and slump forward and hold that position for 10 to 15 seconds. And again, you would want to do that frequently throughout the day. Remember, even without heavy loads, based on the biomechanics of your back is doing a lot of work with any forward bending. Exercise is key to preventing low back pain from work that requires holding your back in such positions. Walking is an ideal activity for you when your work gives you a break throughout the day. If you do develop some back pain, directional stretching, slump stretching, and walking can help provide relief.